This is Sight Words, Neuroscience of Word Recognition and How Tech Helps, as presented at USET 2019 by Russ Fugel, and edited for length.
If we have time afterwards, I can tell you about Swipe 2. This is a great little piece of technology, a little slide presentation I can control with my phone here. But as you join, go ahead and take part in this poll right here. We have someone who walked. Did you walk more than 5 blocks? From the hotel? Great. Took UTA. Wow. I'm going to give away a book to whoever took UTA. Okay, we might come back to that later. So we're going to talk about sight words, we have to talk about recognition. And when we say sight words, we're talking about the visual representation of a word, which is different than the oral representation of a word. A visual representation of the word is made to be recognized visually. It's made out of visual components. And our visual cortex is this recognition machine. So we're going to play with this in the next 10 slides. We have a game, and again, books go for participation. If you see a picture in the next 10 slides, don't say anything. If you see letters, whether or not they make up a complete word, loudly and quickly say the first word that comes to mind. And if you see another poll, participate in the poll as quickly as possible because we're going to move through these quick. All right? Good. Nope, don't say anything if there's a picture. Okay, book goes to this next one. Who said it first correctly? Who knows they said it correctly? I'll give a book out. Okay, this one was a little bit harder than invertebrate. Good. Who said, was it right up here? Book for you. The earliest alphabet, the Phoenician alphabet, did not have vowels. It only used consonants. The vowels could be implied from context, just as right here. The Phoenician alphabet is based on ancient Hebrew, which also has only consonants, no vowels. Did you notice that invertebrate was misspelled? So while we're on this slide, we have to talk about language and the power of language. So by the way I phrased this question, I implied something, that invertebrate was misspelled. And I back that up with the authority of putting it up here on the screen, and also by my authority as a presenter. Was invertebrate actually misspelled? All right, the correct answer is no, it was not. All right, that one's kind of difficult. That one was pretty easy. Now, observance is arguably just as complex as obstreperous, but it's easier to recognize because it is more familiar, it's more frequent, we use it more often. Obstreperous is something that many of us are less familiar with, or perhaps not familiar with at all. So you're forced to sound out the word to try to make the connection. Sounding out words actually takes 10 times or more longer than just recognizing the word by sight. Same thing for inveterate. So was observance misspelled? It was misspelled. It was spelled with an E rather than an A. This is the correct spelling right here. Okay, what did you say? Take a vote. So while we're tallying these results here, I primed you for tusk, and I primed you for task. I primed you for tusk with a mammoth, a walrus, and a blatant picture of an African elephant's tusk. I also primed you for task with the logo of a company called TaskRabbit, if any of you know that company, and also a board with a checklist on it or a task list, right? So I primed for both. It looks like a lot of you were, the last one I showed was that task list. I didn't prime for TISC, but we have a few answers there. So priming, if you haven't joined yet, please do join. Language arguably would not exist without priming. So when I'm up here speaking, if I stop mid-sentence, you're more than likely to be able to guess the word that I'm going to say. Yes. So language works through, in large part, through priming. That's how we can understand each other. Okay. So priming also plays a role in wit and humor. So I prime you to say yolk, but I surprise you with something else, and that's humorous, that's witty, right? So priming plays a role in that too. It also plays a role in crossword puzzles. So this you're being primed in two ways, with the incomplete column in blue and the sentence here, there blank enough hours in the day. And you're also primed here, Facebook calendar listing event, good. So in 1967, a gentleman named Kenneth Goodman wrote this paper called Reading a Psycholinguistic Guessing Game. It launched this movement called whole language, which took off in the 70s and 80s, dipped down in the 90s, kind of took off again, then dipped down again. I'm not here to argue his thesis, but there is an important quote that I pulled from him, which is this: efficient reading does not result from precise perception and identification of all the elements. So that's true. Those of you who did not notice that observance was misspelled were still able to see it and recognize it. So a book goes to anybody who can answer why it dipped down in the 90s. What's that cultural event called? Kind of. Well, whole language is this movement. So this miscue analysis is the red line. Miscue is the blue line. This is a Google Books Ngram viewer, basically how often it's used in each year in publications. So miscue analysis was on the rise. This is the whole language movement. What happened in the 90s? No. There was, I'm looking for a certain phrase, but there was a resurgence of quote unquote evidence-based instruction, basically phonics, and it launched what was called the reading wars. Again, I'm not here to argue whole language or Kenneth Goodman's thesis, but there are some important things to recognize from that. First is that priming is very useful in all language, including reading. And when he said a psycholinguistic guessing game, he was trying to get at priming, which is well researched today. I think it's an unfortunate choice of words to use guessing, because guessing is not useful in learning to read. But I wrote that and then had to go back and put very in there. I'm kind of torn about it. It is kind of useful in this sense, that phonemic recoding is informed guessing. So if I told you to sound out this word B-O-Z-H-O-U, you might come up with something like boss-ho, bozo, I don't know. But if I were to inform you that in the romanization of the Chinese language, ZH represents the sound J, then you might say that, well, Bajo, Bojo. That's also not correct. You're still making a guess. But if you knew there was a city in China with a population of over 8 million that was called Guozhou, and you saw this and you had some information about how the Chinese language is romanized, you would see this and you would say Guozhou, because you're making some guesses, informed guesses, and then from there you're leaping to the correct pronunciation. So quickly, as quick as you can, what's the correct answer here? Stop. Oh, most of you got it right. Okay, so these are common misspellings for official. It's a word we all know, but it's a commonly misspelled word, and these are the common misspellings. On the next slide, we're going to do a similar task, but with something unfamiliar. So less than a second to respond. Quickly, go. Okay, 2's the correct answer here. Okay, in a different language, we're not even going to use the alphabet. Less than a second, go. Okay, the correct answer here is 3. It's gaining some speed here. So one of the flaws in whole language is that we make the assumption, or the way it's implemented, there's the assumption that we need to be taught how to be primed. But we cannot learn language without being able to be primed, okay? So it's not something that needs to be taught. And I'm not an advocate for full-on phonemic instruction in phonemic recoding, actually quite the opposite, but it does have a certain affordance, which is that it leads the emergent reader towards a correct and accurate mapping of word form to the symbol that we're trying to bring to mind. And it does that with some level of independence, even though it can be frustrating for many, many kids. So how tech helps. The first thing that tech can do is it can provide this accurate mapping. If I can read through a book and come across a word I don't know, and if I can touch it and magically hear it said back to me, that kind of puts sounding out words into the realm of writing cursive. You know, it's less useful today than it has been in the past. You can actually ask Alexa, what does T-E-N-T spell? And she'll say tent. I actually wrote a skill. Alexa didn't used to be able to do that. I wrote a skill to have Alexa do that, but it got rejected because I tried to use the basic user interface that they're using now, which didn't follow their guidelines. And I'm not upset that they copied me. Maybe they didn't copy me, but they realize it's a good thing to implement, and they've implemented it. You can also do it on if you're texting. There's a lot of really cool things in iPhone under accessibility. There's similar things in Android. If you're texting, you know how it has the autocomplete word options up above. If you enable it in the accessibility settings and you hold down one of those words, it'll actually say that word to you. So if you're not sure if that's the word you want, hold it down, it says it to you. The other thing that technology does is through computations, it can actually, in a way that we can't do without those computations, it can immerse an emergent reader in familiar text, and that is sight words. Okay, so sight words aren't a strategy, they're not a crutch. Sight words are the result of practiced reading. This is a study from 2018. I'm not going to go through it right now, but I have a link here. Basically showing that sight word vocabulary is a good predictor of reading rate, which is a proxy for fluency, which is important for higher level reading comprehension and everything. So I have my story here on YouTube. There's a link to it. I'm not going to do it right now. Part of my story. I've developed this app for elementary school, early grade students, and for teachers and parents. And I'm inviting you all to be beta testers, work with me directly on this, one-on-one conversations about it. The link to that web app is right here. It works on any device. It's a web app, so you go into it in the browser, but you can actually add it to your home screen, so it's like a standalone app. And through guided access, which is also under the accessibility settings in iOS, you can lock the phone onto that app so it can't be accidentally or intentionally exited out of. And my time's up here, I apologize. But there's some videos here you can go through. What I ask in return for participating, this is all free for participating in the beta test, is to participate also in this International Phonetic Alphabet Study. There's a link to the description of it here. And this is my book. And this is my flyer for the study, and it's there on the table right there. And if you really want to know what I'm trying to do with this beta app for students, if you participate in this study, you'll see from the perspective of a learner exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm also a publisher. I'm accepting submissions if you're interested in trying to publish. I'm very small. I can't give any advances or guarantee you any income, but if you'd like to self-publish, or you're thinking about self-publishing, I'm more than happy to look at your submission, and if it's good, to work with you on that. Also, this NMLK is a children's literary journal where I want to publish children's writing. I have a submission date here of January 4th, but I've pushed that out. I'm not sure when I'm going to publish the first edition at the moment. So that's all I have. There's further reading here, and I'll be posting a link to these slides later. Thank you.